Captain Danny Wright climbed into his fighter ship for the first time in over 300 years. The cockpit felt familiar, like putting on old clothes. His hands found the controls without thinking. Wright had been the best pilot on Earth, before the long sleep. Now, he would lead the first mission to see what had happened to human space. The Liberty's main hangar was huge. It could hold 200 fighter ships with room for more. Robot arms moved the sleek fighters into launch position. The ships were black and silver, built for speed and stealth. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Wright's squadron had 12 ships. All the pilots were veterans who had fought in the wars before humanity left Earth. They knew how to fight against impossible odds. They had done it before. "Liberty Control, this is Ghost Squadron," Wright said into his radio. "Ready for launch." "Ghost Squadron, you are cleared for departure," came the reply. "Remember, this is reconnaissance only. Do not engage unless fired upon." Wright smiled. He knew his orders, but he also knew what they would probably find out there. The aliens had 300 years to get comfortable in human space. They thought they owned it now. The hangar doors opened and space appeared beyond them. Wright pushed his throttle forward, and his fighter shot out into the darkness. 11 more ships followed him. They flew in perfect formation, like they had trained together yesterday instead of centuries ago. The squadron headed toward the inner part of the solar system. This was where the old human colonies had been built. Wright remembered the reports from before the long sleep. Mining stations in the asteroid belt, research posts around the gas giants, small cities on 3 different planets. As they flew closer, Wright saw the remains of human civilization. Broken pieces of metal floated in space where mining stations used to work. The asteroid belt was full of old human equipment, but it was all dead and dark. "Ghost Leader, this is Ghost 3, said one of his pilots. "I am seeing wreckage everywhere, big pieces." Wright looked at his sensors. There were large chunks of metal that looked like they came from spaceships, but these were not warships. They were civilian vessels, colony ships that had been destroyed. "Stay in formation," Wright ordered. "Keep your weapons ready." They flew deeper into the system. Wright's sensors picked up alien ships moving between the planets. The alien vessels were different from human ships. They were larger and moved in straight lines. Human ships were built to change direction quickly and move in unpredictable ways. Ghost Squadron reached the first planet where humans had built a colony. Wright looked down at the surface through his ship's cameras. Where the human city used to be, there was now a massive alien metropolis. Tall buildings covered the entire continent. Millions of aliens lived where thousands of humans once had. "They built right on top of our cities," Wright said quietly. His squadron flew around the planet, staying far enough away to avoid detection. Wright took pictures and recorded everything he saw. The aliens had completely erased the human settlement. Nothing was left to show that humans had ever been there. The second planet was the same. The small human research station had been replaced by a huge alien industrial complex. Factories and processing plants covered the surface. The aliens were using the planet to build their ships and weapons. Wright felt anger growing in his chest. These aliens had not just taken human worlds. They had destroyed every trace that humans had ever existed. It was like they wanted to erase humanity from history. "Ghost Leader, we have a problem," said Ghost 7. "I am detecting alien patrol ships heading this way." Wright checked his sensors. 3 alien ships were moving toward their position. They were still far away, but they would arrive in 10 minutes. "All ships, follow me," Wright ordered. "We are leaving." The squadron turned away from the planet and headed back toward deep space. Wright pushed his engines harder, but he kept his ships together. No one got left behind in his squadron. The alien ships followed them for a while, but gave up when Ghost Squadron reached the edge of the system. Wright was glad. He did not want to fight yet. They needed to learn more about the enemy first. Meanwhile, back on the Liberty, Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan worked in the ship's main engine room. The room was as big as a football stadium, filled with massive machines that powered the ship. Sullivan had been asleep for 3 centuries, but the engines looked exactly like she remembered them. The fusion reactors were working perfectly. The Liberty's power systems were more advanced than anything the aliens had. Human engineers had always been good at building things that lasted. Even after 300 years of sleep, the ship was ready for battle. Sullivan's team was checking every system on the ship. The weapon arrays needed some maintenance, but they would be ready soon. The shield generators were working at full power. The Liberty could protect itself from almost any attack. In another part of the ship, Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks sat in a room full of computers. He was listening to alien radio signals and trying to understand what the aliens were planning. Brooks spoke 6 different languages and was good at breaking enemy codes. The aliens called themselves the Hegemony. They had a military government that controlled hundreds of worlds. They had been expanding across the galaxy for over 2 centuries, taking new territory and enslaving other species. Brooks found records of what happened to the human colonies. The aliens had arrived about 50 years after humanity left Earth. They found the small human settlements and decided humans were a threat to their expansion, so they hunted down every human colony and destroyed them. Some humans had fought back. Brooks found records of space battles between human defense ships and hegemony fleets. The humans had fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. One by one, the human colonies fell. The aliens kept some humans alive for research. They wanted to study human biology and psychology. These prisoners were kept in special facilities on distant worlds. Brooks made a list of these facilities. If any humans were still alive there, the Liberty would find them. Dr. Kane was busy in the medical bay, waking up more crew members. The Liberty carried 50,000 people, and it would take days to wake them all up. Each person who woke up brought special skills that humanity would need. Among the new arrivals was Dr. Helen Torres, who had studied alien species before the long sleep. She looked at the data Brooks had collected about the hegemony. Torres had worked with aliens before, but these hegemony creatures were different. They were completely focused on conquest and control. They do not negotiate, Torres told Morrison. Their philosophy is simple. They take what they want by force. Any species that resists gets destroyed. Morrison nodded. What about their military capabilities? Torres studied the sensor data from Wright's mission. Their ships are powerful but not very maneuverable. They rely on heavy armor and big guns. They are not used to fighting enemies who can outfly them. Commander Paul Jenkins was another important person who woke up. He had been Earth's top military strategist before the long sleep. Jenkins looked at all the intelligence data and made plans for what the Liberty should do next. We have several advantages, Jenkins told the command staff. First, they think we are extinct. Second, our technology is different from theirs. Third, we have the element of surprise. Morrison listened carefully. What do you recommend? Jenkins pointed to a star map. We need to find other human survivors. First, build up our forces, then we hit them hard and fast before they can organize a response. Wright's squadron returned to the Liberty with their reconnaissance data. The fighter ships landed in the hangar bay, and Wright went straight to the bridge to report. The colonies are gone, Wright told Morrison. The aliens destroyed everything and built their own cities on top of them. But I did find something interesting. Wright showed Morrison the pictures he had taken. Among the alien ships around the planets, there were a few vessels that looked different. They were smaller and moved differently from the main hegemony fleet. I think those might be ships from other species the aliens have conquered, Wright explained. They are being forced to serve the hegemony. Morrison studied the images. If other species were fighting against the hegemony, they might be potential allies. The Liberty was powerful, but they could not fight an entire galactic empire alone. Julie Adams, the communications officer, had been working on her own project. She sent out careful radio signals on the old human emergency frequencies. The signals were weak and hard to detect, designed to be heard only by other humans who knew what to listen for. After hours of broadcasting, Adams got her first response. It was faint and came from very far away, but it was definitely human. "This is Colony Ship New Hope," the signal said. "We are still here. We are still fighting. Please respond." Adams ran to the bridge with the news. Morrison felt his heart jump when he heard the message. Somewhere in the galaxy, humans had survived. They were still alive and still fighting against the aliens. Morrison made a decision that would change everything. The Liberty would not hide in the outer system and watch. They would make contact with the surviving humans and help them fight back. The aliens thought humanity was dead, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. The great ship turned toward the source of the signal. The Liberty was no longer sleeping. It was hunting. The hegemony patrol ships moved through space in their usual formation. 3 large cruisers flew in a straight line, their sensors sweeping for anything unusual. The alien crews inside were bored. They had been patrolling this area for months without seeing anything interesting. This part of space was supposed to be empty. Commander Vex Cole sat in his command chair on the lead ship. He was a typical hegemony officer, tall and gray-skinned with 4 arms. His species had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved many other races. Vex Cole had never lost a battle in his 20-year career. "Sir, we are detecting an energy signature near the 4th planet," reported his sensor officer. "It is very large." Vex Cole looked at his display screen. The reading showed something massive hiding behind one of the planet's moons. It was much bigger than any ship in the hegemony fleet. "Move to investigate," Vex Cole ordered. "It is probably just an old asteroid or space debris." The 3 alien cruisers changed course and headed toward the planet. Each ship was over 800 meters long and carried enough weapons to destroy a small city. They had never met an enemy they could not defeat. As they flew closer to the planet, the object came into view. Vex Cole stared at his screen in shock. It was not an asteroid. It was a ship, but unlike anything he had ever seen. The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times larger than his own cruiser. "What species builds ships that large?" asked his weapons officer. Vex Cole studied the design. The ship was long and angular, with weapon ports covering its entire hull. It looked old but well-maintained. The metal was scarred but still strong. This was a warship built for serious combat. "I do not recognize the design," Vex Cole said. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we have found an unknown vessel." Before the communications officer could send the message, the huge ship began to move. It came out from behind the moon slowly, like a sleeping giant waking up. Lights appeared along its hull as weapon systems came online. Then the ship's hangar bays opened. Vex Cole watched in amazement as hundreds of small fighter ships poured out of the massive vessel. The fighters were sleek and fast, moving in perfect formation. They flew in patterns that Vex Cole had never seen before, like schools of fish swimming through water. "All ships, battle stations," Vex Cole ordered. "Prepare to engage." The hegemony. Cruisers turned their weapons toward the approaching fighters. Vex Cole was not worried. His ships had powerful shields and heavy armor. A few hundred small fighters could not possibly threaten his battle group. He was wrong. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez led the attack from his fighter cockpit. Martinez had been a fighter pilot for 15 years before the long sleep. He had fought against alien raiders and human rebels. He knew how to win against superior numbers. "Ghost Squadron, take the left flank," Martinez ordered over the radio. "Angel Squadron, hit them from above. Devil Squadron, follow me in for a direct attack." The human fighters moved with precision that the aliens had never encountered. Each pilot knew exactly where the others were at all times. They communicated without words, flying as if they shared one mind. The first wave of human fighters struck the lead alien cruiser from 3 directions at once. The aliens tried to track them with their weapons, but the human ships were too fast and too unpredictable. The fighters danced around the cruiser's defensive fire like leaves in the wind. Martinez armed his plasma torpedoes and locked onto the alien ship's weapon arrays. He fired 4 torpedoes in rapid succession, then rolled his fighter away from the enemy's return fire. The torpedoes struck the cruiser's main gun turrets, destroying them in brilliant explosions. Other human pilots followed his example. They targeted the alien ship's weapons and engines, not trying to destroy the vessels, but to disable them. The aliens had never faced tactics like this before. They were used to enemies who fought in straight lines and traded shot for shot. Vexcol watched his ship's weapons disappear one by one. His shields were still strong, but he could not fight back without guns. The human fighters were too small and fast for his remaining weapons to hit. "Retreat!" he ordered. "All ships, withdraw to the jump point." The 3 alien cruisers tried to escape, but the human fighters stayed with them. The pilots picked off the cruisers' engines, slowing them down. They destroyed communication arrays, preventing the aliens from calling for help. By the time the alien ships reached the edge of the system, they were helpless. 2 of the cruisers surrendered. The 3rd tried to make a desperate run for freedom. But Ghost Squadron disabled its engines with precise shots. All 3 alien ships were captured without being destroyed. Martinez flew his fighter back to the Liberty, feeling proud of his pilots. They had won a perfect victory without losing a single ship. The aliens would remember this day. Back on the Liberty, Communications Officer Julie Adams was working frantically at her station. The battle had been broadcast on all frequencies, and now her equipment was picking up signals from across the galaxy. Humans everywhere were responding to the news. "Commander Morrison," Adams called out, "you need to hear this." She played the first message. It came from a hidden base in the Andromeda sector. "Liberty, this is Captain Maria Santos of the Resistance ship Freedom. We saw your fight with the Hegemony Patrol. We cannot believe you are real. We have been hiding for 50 years, waiting for Earth to send help." The next message was from a mining colony that had been hiding in an asteroid field. "This is Colony Base 7. We have 300 humans here. We have been living in secret since the Hegemony arrived. Please tell us this is not a dream." More messages came in every minute, from asteroid bases and hidden colonies, from resistance cells and refugee ships. Humans had survived across the galaxy, waiting for someone to come and help them fight back. Dr. Helen Torres studied the captured alien ships with great interest. The Hegemony vessels were well armed but poorly designed. The aliens built their ships for intimidation, not efficiency. They relied on size and firepower instead of speed and tactics. "Their technology is advanced, but they use it badly," Torres reported to Morrison. "They have no creativity in their designs. Everything follows the same basic pattern." Morrison nodded. "What about their crews?" Torres had interrogated the captured aliens through a translation device. "They are trained to follow orders without question. They do not adapt well to unexpected situations. Our fighters confused them because we did not fight the way their manuals said we should." Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan was studying the alien weapons and shield technology. She found that Hegemony equipment was powerful, but inflexible. The aliens had not improved their designs in over a century. "We can build countermeasures for their weapons," Sullivan told Morrison. "Their shields operate on a single frequency. If we modify our weapons to match that frequency, we can punch right through their defenses." Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks was interrogating the alien prisoners. He learned that the Hegemony had over 1,000 worlds under their control. They ruled through fear and overwhelming force. Most of the species they conquered became slaves, or were simply eliminated. "They have a weakness," Brooks reported. "They are not used to facing organized resistance. Their strategy is to crush opposition quickly with superior numbers. They do not know how to fight a long campaign against an enemy who can strike back." Morrison called his senior staff together for a planning meeting. The Liberty floated in, space surrounded by the 3 captured alien ships. More human fighters patrolled the area, watching for enemy reinforcements. "We have sent a message to the galaxy," Morrison said. "The aliens know we exist now. They will send more ships to investigate. We need to be ready." Wright spoke up from his place at the table. "My pilots are ready for anything, but we need more. Ships. The Liberty can carry a lot of fighters, but we cannot be everywhere at once." Sullivan had been thinking about this problem. "The Liberty has construction facilities in its lower decks. We can build more ships if we have the raw materials." Torres pointed to the star charts. "There are asteroid fields throughout this system, plenty of metal and rare elements. We could mine what we need." Morrison made his decision. "We will establish a base here, mine the asteroids, build more ships, and train the human survivors who want to join us. The Liberty will become the center of a new human fleet." Adams had more good news. "Sir, I am getting reports from human groups all over the galaxy. They want to know how they can help. Some have ships and weapons. Others have intelligence about hegemony bases." Morrison felt hope growing in his chest. Humanity was not extinct. They had survived in hidden corners of the galaxy, waiting for someone to lead them. The Liberty would be that leader. He activated the ship's communication system and broadcast a message on all human frequencies. "This is Admiral Morrison of the USS Liberty. We have returned to reclaim human space. All human, survivors, all resistance groups, all free colonies, we call upon you to join us. The galaxy has forgotten what humans can do when we stand together. It is time to remind them." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human ships began moving toward the Liberty's position from across the galaxy. Some were military vessels that had been hiding for decades. Others were converted civilian ships armed with whatever weapons their crews could find. The hegemony had made a terrible mistake. They thought they had destroyed humanity 300 years ago. Instead, the Admiral Vextar stood in the command center of the hegemony's main fleet base. He was the supreme commander of all hegemony, military forces, a position he had earned through 2 centuries of successful conquest. His gray skin was marked with the ritual scars that showed his rank. His 4 arms moved quickly as he studied the reports coming in from across the sector. The reports made no sense. Humans were supposed to be extinct. Vextar's own forces had eliminated the last human colonies 50 years ago. Yet now, his patrol ships were being destroyed by human fighters. His bases were under attack by human warships. Impossible human technology was appearing throughout hegemony space. "Show me the battle recordings again," Vextar ordered his intelligence officer. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the fight between his patrol cruisers and the human fighters. Vextar watched the small human ships move like nothing he had ever seen. They flew in coordinated attacks that required perfect timing and absolute trust between pilots. "How many ships do they have?" Vextar asked. His intelligence chief, a thin creature with 6 eyes, consulted his datapad. "Unknown, sir. They have been spotted in 12 different sectors simultaneously. Their ships appear and disappear without warning. Our forces cannot track their movements." Vextar felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. The hegemony military machine was built to crush enemies through overwhelming force. They would send massive fleets to destroy any opposition. But these humans fought differently. They struck fast and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Another officer approached with more bad news. "Sir, we have lost contact with Mining Base 7 in the Kepler system. Long-range sensors show the base has been completely destroyed." Vextar looked at the tactical display. Mining Base 7 had been defended by 20 warships and orbital defense platforms. It should have been impossible for any enemy force to destroy it without a major fleet engagement. "What destroyed it?" Vextar demanded. "Unknown, sir. The base sent no distress signal. One moment it was operational, the next it was debris. Our investigation ships found no trace of the attacking force." Meanwhile, in the Kepler system, Commander Eric Davis flew his destroyer through the wreckage of the former Hegemony mining base. Davis commanded a small fleet of 5 destroyers that had been awakened from the Liberty's storage bays. These ships were old by human standards, but they incorporated technologies that the aliens had never seen. The attack on Mining Base 7 had been perfect. Davis had used the asteroid field to hide his ships until the last moment. Then his destroyers had appeared simultaneously around the base, firing their weapons from point-blank range. The alien defenders had been destroyed before they could react. "Clean sweep," Davis reported to his communications officer. "All enemy forces eliminated. No survivors to report our tactics." Davis's ships were already moving toward their next target. Human intelligence had identified a hegemony supply convoy carrying weapons to the front lines. The convoy would disappear like the mining base, leaving the aliens to wonder what had happened. The human way of warfare was completely foreign to the hegemony. Aliens fought battles with massive fleets in open space. Humans fought like ghosts, appearing from nowhere to strike and then vanishing again. They targeted supply lines, communication centers, and isolated outposts. They made the aliens afraid to travel alone. Back on the Liberty, Dr. Helen Torres was making important discoveries about alien psychology. She had been studying the captured hegemony prisoners for weeks. What she learned would change how humans fought this war. "They are not as confident as they appear," Torres reported to Admiral Morrison. "Their entire society is based on the belief that they are superior to all other species. When that belief is challenged, they become confused and frightened." Morrison listened carefully. Understanding the enemy's mind was as important as understanding their weapons. What happens when they face an enemy they cannot defeat? Morrison asked. Torres smiled. "They do not know how to handle failure. Their military doctrine assumes they will always have superior numbers and firepower. They have no backup plans for fighting a technologically equal opponent." This information was passed to all human commanders. They began to design their attacks, not just to destroy alien forces, but to demoralize them. Human ships would appear in impossible places. They would destroy targets that should have been unreachable. They would vanish before the aliens could respond. The psychological effect was devastating. Hegemony commanders began to doubt their own abilities. They requested larger escorts for supply convoys. They pulled ships back from the front lines to defend their bases. Fear began to spread through their ranks like a disease. On worlds throughout human space, resistance movements that had hidden for generations began to emerge. They were led by people who had grown up fighting the aliens in secret. People like Maria Gonzalez, whose family had been hiding human children from hegemony collection squads for 3 generations. Maria commanded a resistance cell on the planet that had once been called New Earth. The hegemony had renamed it Conquest Prime and turned it into a major industrial world. Millions of human slaves worked in the alien factories, building ships and weapons for their oppressors. When news of the Liberty's return reached New Earth, Maria knew it was time to act. She activated sleeper cells throughout the planet. Hidden, weapons caches were opened. Sabotage teams struck at power plants and communication centers. The planet erupted in rebellion. The hegemony garrison was caught completely off guard. They had ruled New Earth for 50 years without serious resistance. Suddenly, their own slaves were fighting back with military precision and advanced weapons. Human workers who had seemed harmless revealed themselves as trained soldiers. Tony Richardson led another resistance group on the asteroid mining station, Ceres Base. His grandfather had been one of the original human miners before the hegemony arrived. Tony had spent his entire life planning for this moment. When the signal came from the Liberty, Tony's people struck simultaneously at 12 different points on the station. They captured the control center, the communications array, and the main reactor. Within hours, they had liberated the entire facility and freed 5,000 human slaves. Similar uprisings began happening across the galaxy. The hegemony had thought humans were broken and defeated. Instead, they had been planning and preparing for decades. Every human world had its resistance movement. Every human slave had been waiting for the chance to fight back. The Liberty had become much more than a single ship. It was now the center of a growing fleet. Human vessels arrived every day from hidden bases and distant colonies. Some were military ships that had been in hiding since the original conquest. Others were civilian vessels converted into warships by their desperate crews. Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan worked around the clock to coordinate the construction of new ships. The Liberty's manufacturing bays were producing destroyers and cruisers using advanced automation systems. Robot workers never tired, never needed rest, never made mistakes. The new human ships incorporated the best features of both human and alien technology. They had the speed and maneuverability of human designs combined with the powerful weapons captured from hegemony vessels. Each ship was unique, adapted for specific mission requirements. Sullivan's engineers also developed new weapons specifically designed to counter hegemony defenses. They created plasma cannons that could penetrate alien shields. They built torpedoes that could track enemy ships through hyperspace. They designed electronic warfare systems that could disable alien computers. Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks coordinated the flow of information between the Liberty and Resistance groups throughout the galaxy. He had established a communication network that used quantum entanglement and other advanced technologies to send messages instantly across any distance. The intelligence Brooks gathered painted a picture of an alien empire in growing panic. Hegemony. Commanders were demanding reinforcements that did not exist. Supply lines were being disrupted faster than they could be repaired. Morale was collapsing as news of human victories spread. Most importantly, other enslaved species were beginning to rebel. The hegemony had conquered dozens of races over the centuries. These species had been forced to serve as soldiers and workers for their alien masters. But when they saw humans fighting back successfully, they began to believe that freedom was possible. The Zelanti, a species of insectoid warriors, launched coordinated attacks on hegemony military bases in their home sector. The Corvan traders, who had been forced to carry supplies for the alien fleet, began sabotaging their own ships. The Thexian scientists, enslaved to develop new weapons, started feeding false data to their masters. Admiral Morrison realized that this war was about more than just human survival. It was about the liberation of the entire galaxy from hegemony tyranny. The Liberty had awakened not just humanity, but the spirit of resistance in every enslaved species. Morrison called his senior staff together for a crucial meeting. The war was expanding beyond anything they had originally planned. They needed a new strategy to coordinate resistance across multiple species and hundreds of worlds. We are. The final battle began at the edge of the Kepler Prime system. Admiral Vextar had gathered the largest fleet in hegemony history, over 1,000 warships stretched across space in perfect formation. Massive dreadnoughts led the fleet, each one large enough to carry a small city. Behind them came heavy cruisers, destroyers, and countless fighter craft. Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator. The ship was 5 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets. He had brought every available vessel from across the hegemony empire. This would be the battle that ended the human rebellion once and for all. Today we restore order to the galaxy, Vextar announced to his fleet. The humans think they can challenge our rightful rule. We will show them the price of defying the hegemony. The alien fleet moved toward Kepler Prime, the world that had once been humanity's greatest colony. The planet now hosted the hegemony's sector capital, with billions of alien citizens living in massive cities. Vextar intended to use the planet as bait, forcing the humans to come to him. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty as his sensors detected the approaching enemy fleet. The human supercarrier hung in space above Kepler Prime, looking small compared to the massive alien armada. But Morrison was not worried about the odds. He had faced impossible situations before. "All stations report ready," announced his tactical officer Amy Foster. "Weapon systems at full power, shield generators operating at maximum efficiency." Morrison looked around the bridge at his command crew. These were the best officers humanity had ever produced. They had been chosen for this mission because they never gave up, never backed down, never accepted defeat. Today they would prove that human determination was stronger than alien numbers. The Liberty was not alone. Around the great ship, a fleet of human vessels waited in perfect formation, 500 ships of various sizes and designs, all crewed by humans who had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. Former slaves who had won their freedom, resistance fighters who had never stopped believing, colonists who had hidden. In the darkness for generations, Captain Danny Wright led the fighter squadrons. 2,000 human pilots sat in their cockpits, ready to launch at his command. Each pilot was a veteran of dozens of battles against hegemony forces. They knew their ships better than their own bodies. They flew like extensions of their own will. But the human fleet had more than just human allies. Ships from a dozen different species floated alongside the human vessels. The Zelanti had sent their warrior fleets. The Corvan traders had armed their merchant ships. The Thexian scientists had brought vessels equipped with experimental weapons. All the enslaved races of the galaxy had united under human leadership. Commander Eric Davis commanded the destroyer squadrons. His ships were sleek and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks. They carried the most advanced weapons human science could produce. Plasma cannons that could punch through any shield. Gravitational torpedoes that bent space itself. Electronic warfare systems that could take control of enemy computers. The two fleets approached each other across the void of space. The hegemony armada moved in rigid formation, following tactics that had not changed in 2 centuries. The human fleet moved like a living thing, ships flowing and shifting position in patterns that seemed random but were actually perfectly coordinated. Morrison opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. His voice reached every ship, every pilot, every crew member who had joined the fight for freedom. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species that has suffered under hegemony rule. We fight for the colonies they destroyed, the families they separated, the futures they stole. We fight because someone must stand up to tyranny, and when this battle is over, the galaxy will remember why humans were once called the most dangerous species among the stars. The battle began when the first hegemony dreadnought fired its main guns. Massive energy beams lanced across space toward the Liberty. The human supercarrier's shields flared as they absorbed the impact, but they held firm. Morrison smiled. The aliens had just made their first mistake. They had revealed their positions. Wright's fighter squadrons launched, simultaneously from 100 different ships. 2,000 small craft accelerated toward the enemy fleet in a cloud of metal and fire. The human pilots flew in formations that confused alien sensors. They seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from angles the enemy could not predict. Hegemony fleet tried to respond with their own fighters, but they were no match for human pilots. The alien ships flew in straight lines, following predictable patterns. Human fighters danced around them like leaves in a hurricane. Within minutes, the space around the alien fleet was filled with burning wreckage. Davis led his destroyers in a flanking attack against the enemy's left wing. The human ships appeared out of hyperspace directly behind a formation of alien cruisers. Before the aliens could react, Davis's weapons were tearing through their engines and weapon arrays. The alien ships were crippled before they knew they were under attack. But the hegemony fleet was massive, and they fought back with desperate fury. Their heavy weapons began to find their targets. Several human ships were destroyed in brilliant explosions. The aliens concentrated their fire on the Liberty, trying to eliminate the human command ship. Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan worked frantically to keep the Liberty's systems operational. Alien weapons pounded the ship's shields, draining power. faster than the reactors could supply it. Emergency repair teams raced through the corridors, fixing damaged systems and rerouting power cables. Shields down to 60%, Foster reported. Multiple hits on the forward sections. We are taking heavy damage. Morrison remained calm. All ships, implement attack pattern 7. Hit them from every direction at once. The human fleet suddenly scattered, each ship moving in a different direction. The aliens tried to follow them, but they could not track so many targets at once. Then the human ships attacked simultaneously from all sides. The rigid hegemony formation collapsed into chaos. Wright's fighters penetrated deep into the enemy fleet, targeting the bridges and command centers of alien ships. Human pilots flew their craft directly into the gaps between enemy vessels, places where large ships could not maneuver. They struck at weak points and vital systems, causing maximum damage with surgical precision. The Xalanti warrior fleet joined the battle with their own unique style of combat. Their ships were built like flying fortresses, heavily armored and designed for close-range fighting. They charged directly into the enemy formation, absorbing massive damage while their own weapons carved through alien hulls. Dr. Helen Torres had predicted that the aliens would panic when their careful plans fell apart. She was right. Hegemony commanders began issuing contradictory orders. Ships collided with each other as they tried to reform their lines. The alien fleet's coordination collapsed completely. Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks monitored enemy communications and provided real-time updates to human commanders. He could hear the fear in alien voices as they realized they were losing. Calls for retreat were already being transmitted, even though the battle had barely begun. Vexatar watched his fleet disintegrating around him. Ships that had never been defeated were falling like dominoes. His carefully planned formation was scattered across space. Worse, his own officers were beginning to question his orders. "Sir, we should withdraw," his tactical officer suggested. "We are taking massive casualties. This is not a battle we can win." Vextar struck the officer with one of his forearms. "We do not retreat. We are the hegemony. We do not lose to primitives." But even as he spoke, Vextar knew the battle was lost. The humans fought with a coordination and creativity that his forces could not match. Their ships moved like extensions of their pilots' minds. Their tactics changed faster than his commanders could adapt. Morrison saw the moment when the alien fleet began to break. Enemy ships were turning away from the battle, their crews abandoning their positions. The hegemony's morale was shattered. Now was the time to end this war forever. "All ships, final assault," Morrison ordered. "Target their command vessels. Show them what happens when they threaten human space." The Liberty's main guns came to life. Plasma beams that could melt asteroids reached out across space to strike the alien flagship. The Dominator's shields collapsed under the assault. Vextar's ship began to break apart under the concentrated fire of human weapons. Wright's fighters swarmed over the remaining alien dreadnoughts. Human pilots showed no mercy to enemies who had enslaved entire species. They targeted reactor cores and ammunition storage, causing massive explosions that lit up the darkness of space. Davis's destroyers hunted down fleeing alien ships, making sure none escaped to carry word of this defeat. The few hegemony vessels that surrendered were taken prisoner. The rest were destroyed or driven from the field. When the battle ended, space around Kepler Prime was filled with the wreckage of the hegemony fleet. Less than 100 alien ships had escaped. The rest were either destroyed or captured. The greatest military force in galactic history had been shattered by human determination and superior tactics. Morrison stood on his bridge looking out at the debris field that had once been an enemy fleet. The Liberty hung in space above Kepler Prime, its hull scarred but intact. Around the alarm bells rang through the communications center on Kepler 442b. Colony manager Jake Morrison ran down the metal hallway as red lights flashed above him. His boots made loud sounds on the floor as he rushed to the main control room. "What's the situation?" Jake asked as he burst through the doors. Lisa Hayes looked up from her computer screen. Her face was pale, and her hands shook as she pointed to the display. "Look at this," she said. 27 asteroids heading straight for us. They'll hit the planet in 6 days. Jake stared at the screen. The asteroids were huge, some as big as mountains. Each one could destroy an entire city. Together, they would kill everyone on Kepler 442b. All 3 million people living in the mining colonies would die. "Send the emergency signal to the Galactic Council," Jake said. "They have to help us." Lisa's fingers moved fast over the keyboard. She sent the distress call to Nexus Prime, the giant space station where the Galactic Council met. The message was simple and clear. "Emergency on Kepler 442b, asteroid impact in 6 days. Need immediate help. 3 million lives at risk." Jake looked out the window at the busy mining operations below. Families lived here. Children played in the parks between the mining towers. None of them knew that death was coming from space. Far away on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Pete Collins sat in the human section of the council chamber. The room was enormous, with seats for representatives from 47 different alien species. Each species had their own area with special equipment for their needs. Pete's communication device beeped. He read the message from Kepler 442b, and his stomach dropped. He had seen disasters like this before. The asteroids would hit the planet. Like bombs! Nothing could survive. "Emergency session!" Pete shouted as he stood up. "We have a crisis on Kepler 442b!" The council chamber slowly filled with alien beings. There were the tall, thin ethereals who looked like walking crystals. The reptilian Vorthans with their green scales and cold yellow eyes. The insect-like collective members with their multiple arms and compound eyes. Each species took their time getting to their seats. High Chancellor Velterin floated above the center of the room. His crystal body glowed with soft blue light. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Collins," he said in his musical voice. Pete walked to the speaking platform. "Thank you, Chancellor. We have received a distress call from the human mining colonies on Kepler 442b. 27 large asteroids will impact the planet in 6 days. 3 million people will die if we don't act now." The chamber filled with the sounds of different species talking to each other. Some made clicking noises, others hummed, and a few spoke in languages that sounded like music. Councillor Zethkar of the Vorthans raised his clawed hand. "How do we know this is accurate?" he asked. His voice was cold and sharp. "Humans often exaggerate their problems." Pete felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "Our sensors are very accurate. We've sent all the data to the Council's Science Division. They can confirm what we're telling you." "Even if this is true," said Councillor Yithala, "of the Collective, we must follow proper procedures. We cannot just rush into action without careful planning." "There's no time for planning," Pete said, his voice getting louder. "People are going to die." High Chancellor Velterin raised one of his crystal arms. "Ambassador Collins, please control yourself. The Council will form a committee to study this situation. We will have a recommendation in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Pete couldn't believe what he was hearing. "The asteroids hit in 6 days. There won't be anyone left to save in 2 weeks. "Perhaps the colonists should have chosen a safer location," Zethkar said with a cold smile. "The humans always build their settlements in dangerous places and then expect us to rescue them." Pete looked around the chamber. He had been fighting these same battles for 10 years. Every time there was a crisis, the humans responded while the Council talked. When pirates attacked the trade routes, human ships fought them off. When disease broke out on Sigma Prime, human doctors saved millions of lives. When the Krellian border war started, human negotiators made peace. The Council took credit for all of it, but they never wanted to do the work. Captain Helen Parker sat in the viewing gallery above the main floor. She commanded the human military ships in this sector. She had fought in 12 different conflicts to protect Council worlds. She watched Pete's face and knew exactly what he was thinking. "Motion to form the Emergency Response Committee," announced Veltaran. "All in favor?" Most of the alien representatives raised their hands or tentacles or whatever they used to vote. Only a few species voted against it. "Motion passed," Veltaran said. "The committee will meet next week to discuss possible actions." Pete stood very still for a long moment. Around him, the alien representatives started talking about other business. They had already forgotten about the 3 million people who were about to die. Helen Parker stood up in the gallery. She walked down to the main floor and joined Pete at the speaking platform. The chamber grew quiet as they watched the two humans. "Honored council members," Pete said in a calm voice. "For 50 years, humanity has been part of this council. We have answered every call for help. We have fought in your wars, stopped your diseases, and built your trade routes." He paused and looked around the room. "We have done this because we believed in the idea of different species working together. We thought this council stood for justice and helping those in need." Zethkar laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "Are you threatening us, human?" "No," Pete said. "I'm informing you, as of this moment, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will no longer answer your emergency calls. We will no longer fight your battles. We will no longer fix your problems." The chamber exploded in noise. Aliens shouted in dozens, of different languages. Some stood up and waved their arms or tentacles. Others made angry sounds that had no words. "You cannot do this." Veltaran's crystal body flashed bright red. "You have responsibilities." "Yes, we do," Helen Parker said as she stepped forward. "Our responsibility is to the people of Kepler 442b. While you sit here and form committees, we're going to save them." Pete and Helen walked toward the exit. Other human representatives in the chamber stood up and followed them. The alien council members watched in shock as every human left the room. "This is temporary madness," Zethkar called after them. "You'll be back when you need our help." Pete stopped at the doorway and turned around. "Counselor Zethkar, in 50 years of membership, humanity has never once asked this council for help. We have only given it." The doors closed behind them with a soft sound that seemed to echo through the silent chamber. On his ship in orbit around Nexus Prime, Admiral Nick Davis received Pete's message. Within an hour, every human ship in the sector began moving toward Kepler 442b. They had asteroid deflection equipment, rescue ships, and medical supplies. Back in the council chamber, the alien representatives sat in stunned silence. They had always assumed the humans would be there. The humans fixed things. The humans solved problems. That's what humans did. High Chancellor Veltaran's crystal body dimmed as he realized what had just happened. For the first time in galactic history, a member species had walked away from the council. Not because they were conquered or destroyed, but because they chose to leave. "What do we do now?" asked a small voice from the back of the chamber. Nobody had an answer.